wine peeps, it's Kathy Meyer, Chief Joyologist at WineLoveJoy, and welcome back to another episode of Wine Time. Now this week, instead of having a guest with me, I've brought three of my favorite friends at the holiday time because it is almost Christmas, and they are my elves, Jolly, that I started with. He was then joined by Tacky and now Woodsy. So obviously I've had my friends with me tonight, but I want to talk about some wine education. And that's why we're focusing tonight in just kind of a solo. Don't worry, I will have guests on future shows, but I do want to take an episode from time to time to just kind of give you some wine education. So the wine that we're going to be sampling tonight is the Glory Cellars Chenin Blanc. And this one is again from the Glory Cellars line. $2 from every bottle of this wine goes to support America's Mighty Warriors. But before we get there, I want to talk about how to evaluate wine using the 4 S's. Now you've probably heard this, or you've probably even seen someone do it. But I want to talk about what it is and why do we even do it to begin with. We don't want to do it just to look snooty. We're trying to do it for some real purpose, real practical purpose. So let's talk about the 4 S's as we look at the Chenin Blanc. The first S that you're going to do when you evaluate wine is sight, or to see the wine. And what we're doing when we're seeing the wine is we're looking for just a couple things. First of all, is it the appropriate color? So a Chenin Blanc, especially this one, which is a 2014, is going to be a very light yellow color. And this one is right on mark. So it's a nice light color of the yellow. And if it were more of a dark yellow, I would think it was an older wine, or if it was turning brown, I might think that there's something funky going on in the glass. That's the first thing. The second thing is when you're looking at it, see if it's clear. And a great way to see if something's clear is to take a piece of paper and then try to read through it. And here's a little tip for all of you people that might be a little older and might need some glasses. Let's pretend you don't know where your readers are. This actually magnifies what you're reading. So this can be used kind of as a temporary fix when you need to see something with small print. And if you can see through it and it's clear, that's what we want. We do not want anything that's hazy, and we don't want things that are kind of suspended and floating in there for no reason. Now, I do want to caution you, sometimes, especially if you get your wine really cold, the glass will kind of look like it's a little cloudy, but that's just because it's being taken down to such a cold temperature, and it kind of gets, you know, like when you're out in your car and it gets a little foggy. That is not the same thing as looking at the wine. So the wine is what we're looking through to make sure it's clear. So that's the first S, sight or seeing. The second and the third, they kind of go together. So generally, the second is to swirl, and then the third is to sniff. But before you do that, I want to encourage you to just take a sniff right off the bat. And when I say take a sniff, I mean really stick your nose in there and get a good breath. And you're going to smell some things in the wine. And there are typical smells that you might get on a Chenin Blanc or any wine. And it's good to familiarize yourself what those typical aromas are. But now let's swirl. And this is why we don't fill our glasses too full, because if you fill your glass too full and you swirl, you're going to be wearing it, or it's going to be all over your counter. So give it a nice swirl and now take a sniff. Oh my goodness, so it is so much more pronounced on the aromas that I'm smelling than when I did it before I swirled. And the reason is because wine has these compounds in it, these esters, or these aroma buds, that when you swirl the wine and you give it some more surface area for oxygen to come touch it, it's releasing those volatile compounds, those esters, so you can get the aroma. And it's beautiful. Now this one, again, a young Chenin Blanc. This I'm picking up a little grapefruit, maybe a little apricot on there. A little nuttiness, in fact. So this can even be a little floral smelling, and you can get some, you know, even some dry herbs in there, very light, like more like a hay smell. And those are typical aromas. The reason that we are swirling and sniffing is because, again, we want to see, are these typical aromas? And these smell delicious. If I were smelling something that smelled like a wet dog in here, that would be a little atypical for a Chenin Blanc that's coming from California. Or if I smelled something that smelled like fingernail polish or grandma's damp basement, those are going to be warning signals that maybe there's something funky going on in the glass. And the reason that we're testing this out is because before we put it in our mouth, we want to make sure that this is a quality product that we're going to be drinking. So then the fourth S is my favorite, which is sip. Now I just did a quick little sip and I let it hang on my tongue for just a minute. Well, not even a minute, just a few seconds. There are some wine tasters who like to get, especially the professional ones, who like to take up to 40 seconds, even to a minute, to kind of chew that and get some flavors going on in there to see what they're experiencing. Now, obviously, if you're an everyday wine drinker, your purpose isn't to evaluate the wine other than to make sure it's good to put in your mouth. Well, once it's in your mouth, then we're all golden and we're having a good time. I will have to say that there is a fifth S out there for anybody who might be leaning towards the professional wine tasting, especially those that are doing tastings of a few hundred wines in a week. Is the fifth S is to spit. Now, I suggest when you spit that you get yourself a personal cup that you can spit in. So you're not spitting in the community pour jar. That's not in good taste. What you will find if you do want to try the experiment with spitting is that you will still get the same experience of having all of the aromas of the wine that you're smelling and then the flavors that you're tasting, but you won't have the buzz, especially if you're sampling several wines. So that's how we evaluate wines. Now, I do want to caution you on something, and that is that if you do find something's floating in your wine, it's not necessarily a bad thing. First of all, you don't want cork floating in your wine, so you might want to be a little more careful if you're taking out the cork, or if you do find that you maybe have broken off the cork into the wine, that you may want to put something in here, one of the stoppers that has a little filter, so that when you pour it, it kind of filters it off. But if you see some things that look like salt or sugar crystals in there, those are just the tartrates that have kind of come together. It's the acids in the wine. They form these hard crystals and they've dropped to the bottom of the wine because they weren't cold stabilized, and when it got really, really cold, they just found warmth in each other and dropped to the bottom. You might also find that you have some floaties in your wine, especially if you have an old wine, especially our big red, where it's morphed over time and they've kind of come together and the proteins are sitting there and they kind of settle to the bottom as sediment. Again, not a bad thing. Maybe not the most delicious thing to drink in your glass, but again, you can filter that with one of those little stoppers that has the filter built in. Okay, now that we've talked about how to evaluate wine, let's talk about this specific wine and this varietal, the Chenin Blanc. I'm sure not a lot of you have probably heard of Chenin Blanc, but it is a delicious wine that's out there, and I encourage you to try it. So it originated in France, as do a lot of the grapes that are out there. And one of the places that it really shines in France is in the Loire Valley. In fact, you will have, if you have something called a Vouvray, that is a wine from the Loire Valley that's based on the Chenin Blanc grape. And Blanc in French simply means white, and so this is the Chenin white grape. You will also, if you have a Cremant, which is a sparkling wine from France that's not from the Champagne region, again, remember Champagne has to do with the sparkling wine made from the Champagne region. But if you're in the rest of France, you're getting a sparkling, it's called a Cremant often, and that, if you are having the Cremant from the Loire Valley, again, based on the Chenin Blanc grape. This Chenin Blanc grape not only comes from France, but actually has spread around the world. And one of the places, actually the place that it's grown the most, that has the most acreage, is in South Africa. And they actually have a different name for it. You will find it called Steen, S-T-E-E-N. And they do make some fabulous wines down there, a little more acidic. I will say this is a dry white, but Chenin Blanc can be made in several styles, like we talked about with the sparkling. It can be made in the still dry, and it can also be made into a sweeter wine, especially a dessert wine that's had noble rot, which is called when it has the botrytis in it, which is it just kind of sucks the water out of the grape and makes it really concentrated sugars, and so they have delicious dessert wines made from that. So this can be made in many styles. And we also grow it in the United States. This one particularly came from California, and this was, like I said, harvested in 2014. So this is a delightful version of the wine. I think it's a very summery wine to me. So even though it's almost Christmas, I'm kind of thinking of those warm summer days we're going to have. And it's definitely an absolutely fabulous porch sipper. So you'll want to stock up on this one and have it ready for next year. But this one is great now, especially if you're going to have some seafood. I know as we get into the new year and into January, as we start looking at healthier eating and we start eating more fish and seafood, this would be a great wine with that. Also great with chicken and some of our lighter cheeses. So I love goat cheese, maybe goat cheese with some walnuts and a little honey drizzled on top. That would be fabulous with this. So I highly encourage you to check out Chenin Blanc. And Chenin is spelled Chenin. And again, Blanc, B-L-A-N-C. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Hopefully you found some fun things to learn about why we evaluate wine, and definitely on our Chenin Blanc. So until next time, cheers.